Where should I start? Guess it's going to be a ramble. Yesterday was the graduation of my grandson from kindergarten. I guess it's a rite of passage. He's at this particular school for like 3 years. Yeah, 3 years. This is the end of his third year at this particular school. And we've taken him from barely being able to write, didn't know his alphabets, to the point where he's not quite where we want him to be as far as reading is concerned, because I think he's a little bit behind as far as for my taste. For the average 5 or 6 year old, he's fine. But from where I wanted him to be, he's probably behind, but that's neither here nor there. But it kind of reminds me of what it's like to be a parent, even though he's not on my contract. That's my daughter's son. But it takes me back on what it's like to raise a child. And as a father, your mindset is compared to the woman's mindset. My mother, who wants to be a matriarch and who's 80 years old, and basically this is her last baby. She's kind of taken to him like this child is her own. And then I have my sisters who neither one of my sisters have children. So there's that. So not every woman is a baby mama, and my sisters are in their 50s and they don't have children. So they are that where I think it's 20% now that a lot of women end their fertility without having children, Black women included. So they're in that 1/5, or maybe a little bit less than 1/5 of Black women that end their fertility and never have kids. So all those guys that said there's nothing but baby mamas out there, that is not true. So it reminds me of the role that a father has, or that mindset that a father has, is about building a person and being selfless instead of selfish. Because other than the product of getting a good human being out on the other side, which is what you really hope. You hope that he's successful. You hope that he's going to be rich. He's going to be a far better person than you are. But what you hope to be on the other side is for him to be a decent person. So the whole family got together to actually celebrate my grandson's graduation from kindergarten and show our appreciation for his hard work, because that's basically what it really is, or appreciation for his hard work. Because I took him through some tasks, because as far as him doing his homework and that kind of stuff, I've been tasked with being the taskmaster and making him go through the rituals, go through the learning process. Sometimes I haven't been easy on him, but it kind of reminded me of something that the hangout we had just did. It was actually not supposed to be a hangout with Obsidian. He wasn't really invited. He kind of invited himself, which is fine, because when I open it up for everybody. And as much as people would like to think that me and he are enemies, we can't be, because he's not blocked. And to this day, he's still not blocked. Me being a Gemini, I am very trusting until you show me that you can't be trusted. And he's done a few things to me and other folks that shows me that I can't particularly trust him, which there's very few people on YouTube that I would trust. And I keep that circle tight. Not necessarily for me, because hell, I'm old. I don't really have a reputation to protect. I'm not trying to leave a indelible legacy. Okay, so I particularly don't care. I've always been that way. But the people that are around me is the people that I want to protect, because what I do in public, with YouTube is in public, it shouldn't have any bearing on who they are and what they do in their lives. That's the only real reason I don't like to reveal who I am or my identity, at least publicly. And as far as that kind of stuff, I don't really trust very many people as far as my personal life. There's a few, There's a very few. And those people that can verify that I am who I say I am. But be that as it may, I don't want to ramble too far away from the point. But it's the mindset of being a father, of being a parent, and why that's important to your development as a man. Because the whole family was over, and my grandsons were over, and my son and his son were over. And normally he's a young man. Well, he's a young man. He's still young. He'll be 32. And as a young man, normally it's like we got places to go and things to do and chicks to see and that kind of stuff. And he kind of bugs out. Normally he comes in, shows his face, eats a little bit, and he bugs out. But yesterday he stayed. He stayed a lot longer than I expected him to stay. And he hung out. And what happens is we had a chat. Men do. We sit on, we're sitting out front on the porch and we're watching the little boys ride their little bikes up and down the sidewalk and interact and have a good time. So we're just sitting there and, we just started chatting. We started chatting about kids and life and the problems he was having with his wife. Yes, he is married. That's a story within itself. But it reminds me of what I went through when I had my children, my first child, and the mindset, how it changed your mindset. Because me and Angry Man and a few others have talked about that. When you first see that little bugger come out and it opens its eyes and looks at you, and how it internally it changes you. It changes your whole focus, and it changes you from being a selfish person to a selfless person. It changes your mission, or should change your mission in life. Some men it probably doesn't, but for most men, I think it changes your mission. Even as harsh and hard as we think we are, it does. It comes to mind about the scene with Thanos and Gamora when he had to sacrifice Gamora, and even the point where he was on Gamora's planet when he actually adopted Gamora. That instance when he turned her head away from the violence, just a little bit turned him from a selfish person to a selfless person. Just a little bit. And that's what a child does for you. I saw that in myself. I've seen that in other men, and I've seen that in my son. My son is an excellent father. And other parts of his life could use some work, and me and his grandfather were talking about that yesterday, but other parts of his life can use some work. But as far as him being a father, he's a dedicated father. In fact, he is primary caretaker for his son. And I've seen how that has changed him, not only him, but he also is a good caretaker for his nephews. And I see a lot of how he interacts with his boys. I see a lot of me in him. But I notice a change in him from being that cat house alpha male that's doing whatever willy-nilly to him becoming that selfless person as this little boy grows. And the sacrifices that you have to make because you do have a child. And how it changes a man's psyche and his emotions, because it brings out his anima, or his female side has to grow. His nurturing side has to grow, because to raise and nurture and bond with that child, your female side has to grow, because your bonding comes from your female side. How you see the world changes when that female side grows. How you feel more connected with the world when that female side grows. And through that child, through the process of knowing that you have to get that child from point A to point B and make that child the best person possible, you have to tap into that. You have to tap into that female side. You have to tap into that nurturing, because you can't be a harsh taskmaster. You can't be an asshole. You can't be a fighter, because that creature is a part of you. And that creature that you develop becomes you, because you are trying to make a perfected copy of you. And you got to draw on all your experience, what you've done wrong, what your parents have done wrong, and correct all these mistakes that you feel that have been done to you, and actually perfect those and feed that back to your child so the child will not have that legacy. I remember, man, it's got to be, at this point, it's got to be 25 years ago. Women used to ask me about what kind of man should they have and what kind of man should they date. I used to have a saying, which I don't have anymore because of how the environment, legal and cultural and social environment is between men and women. I used to tell women that you should never marry or get serious with any man over a certain age. I used to be like 32 or 33 that didn't have a child. And they always ask me why. At a certain age, there's a certain phase you have to go through right around your 30s when you actually really start becoming a man. You're on the way to manhood at the age of 13, at puberty. Your sexual side starts to awaken. So you're on the road to manhood. You never really get to manhood. That is always a goal. It's never a destination. It's a goal that you're trying to attain. You never really get there. You're always perfecting. You're always working on that manhood piece the whole life. I'm still working on it. But there's a phase right around 30 when you start knowing yourself, you start knowing who you are as a man. And part of that, knowing who you are as a man, is being selfless. Now, from 13 to right around 30, you're selfish because you're gathering material, you're gathering experiences to mold that yourself into that man that you're going to be. So you have to be selfish. But at some point, you're supposed to balance that out with being selfless. And part of that balancing out comes from looking outside yourself. Now, some men can do it, and some people can do it without going through the experience of childhood, women included. There's some women that can actually become enlightened without ever giving birth. But for most people, they need that experience because that's a lessons that they need to learn, that only your children can teach you some lessons. Only your teacher can be your mirror, because there's lots of things that you do, a lot of quirks that you have that have been so ingrained and so normal to you that you will not see them because you are looking in a physical mirror and you can't see it because your filter would not allow those in because they're so normal. They're just part of you. But when you see those things reflected in your child, you say, where does that come from? And the way that child acts and what that child does, because it has your DNA, okay? It has your material. That child reflects what you do, and it's like a perfect mirror. And it gives you a chance to correct yourself. It gives you a chance to reflect on things. That's part of your maturity. And while it's an expensive lesson, because children are expensive, children are a sacrifice, but children are also part of completing your missions. You're a Jedi. Facing yourself is part of being a Jedi. Having a child is part of facing yourself. You're literally facing yourself. As Darth Vader did in Return of the Jedi, he faced his son. He faced himself and was forced to look at himself through his son. Which brings me to Obsidian. This is probably one of the last videos. I have maybe one more, but this is probably one of the last videos I'm actually going to do on Obsidian because I have no wish to beef with Obsidian. I never have. We were actually talking about this on the Hangout. This is something he constantly brings up about his prom day, which is, it's not unusual for somebody to remember it either positively or negatively, but it is unusual for somebody to dwell on it. And normally the people that dwell on their prom day or their prom date or something like that is women, because for women, it's a rite of passage. If they have a debutante, or if they're Hispanic, when they turn 15, become a woman of the quinceañera party, or for American women, which is your prom. Your prom for a woman, their prom is a rite of passage. For men, it's just an event. Most men, like my prom, I can barely remember my prom. It was, the girl was cute. There was issues and stuff like that. But for the most part, I could have skipped my prom and never thought about it again. It was not the highlight of my life. It's not the low light of my life. My prom was probably more important to my parents than it was to me. But for something that happened in high school and it's not something that lasted for years. It was just one incident in high school. It's one incident with his family. And it's a sore spot that over the years that I've known him, he's repeated many times. And I'm like, what's going on with a person where a prom that he didn't even go to, that he refused to go to, they sat out, would be such a traumatic event for a man that's now close to 50 or maybe even 50. And during the hangout, I don't know if me and Angry Man saw it at the same time, we had this epiphany. It's like, everybody's heard the story. If you haven't heard the story, for people that haven't heard the story, then don't know who Obsidian is, let me relate the story very quickly. From what Obsidian says, he's attracted to very pretty women, and having a pretty woman on his arm is important to him. And sometimes there's certain events that give you a glimpse of when no matter what you think, give you a glimpse of whether you're select or not select, or what level of woman you can attract. I don't know if this was in this case or not, but in my opinion, you should have known that well before your prom. That's just me. I could be wrong. I'm an older man, so even back then, that's something that you should have known well before. You kind of know where you fit as far as the mating dance, like, man, hell, going back to middle school pretty much. But whatever reason, Obsidian shot his shot at, I don't know where these women ranked as far as looks in his particular high school or his particular environment. I don't know where they ranked. But he said he shot his shot at about 6 or 7 of the women that were on his list, and they all turned him down. And so, since he couldn't go to the prom the way he wanted to, he wasn't willing to, as the women say, settle, which is perfectly fine. I kind of get a glimpse about what he means because it is a public statement to go out with a certain look of woman on your arm because you're making a public statement about who you are and this, that, and the third. So I get that. But he decided that if he couldn't do it the way he wanted to do it, he would sit it out, which is, like I say, perfectly fine. Remember when I say sometimes the prom is more important to your parents, especially the women folk in your family, than you? Now, the women folk took up the mantle, and they thought that even though he didn't want to go to the prom because he couldn't get what he wanted, in their mind, they thought that, okay, he can't get a date, so we need to step in and assist him. Even above his protestation about them stepping in and assisting him, which women folk do. The women folk in my family do the same thing. Even today, and you have to pick your battles. Which battle do you fight and you make your stand, and which battle you say, you know what, it doesn't even matter. I'm just gonna let it ride and let them do what they do, and chalk that up to women being women. Women folk always do that because they think it's in your best interest. If you notice about your women folk in your best interest, especially in your family, because they're trying to protect their little nestlings, sometimes it'll be on your plus side, sometimes it'll be on your minus side. It just depends on how that egg breaks and scrambles. In this case, up to Obsidian was negative because they were trying to find women, a group of women for him to choose from that weren't up to his standard. And he told them such, which they thought in their minds, you know, women are, if they thought it was him, he was being silly and he should go to the prom and have a good time regardless of whether he had to settle. And it caused a rift between him and the women folk in his family. Because in his mind, they didn't respect his decision not to set out the prom, and they tried to force lesser women on him. Now, I can't speak to the look of the woman or the quality of women that he was being offered. I can't speak to that, but that is beside the point. Now, he said this continued for some weeks, and for some time it even continued later on in life, like as a young man, where women in his family were trying to matchmake him with what he deems as substandard women. Okay, I get it. You know, it's happened to me. It's happened to every man, where your mother tries to matchmake you with women that are not your cup of tea. But what we couldn't figure out is why, what we believe, what we think is small. I'm not saying because I can't speak for him, because how an event impacts a person's psyche is different for every person. And the pebble that we think is small is a boulder to somebody else. But what we couldn't figure out is why is this event that is normal for a lot of men will become a boulder, such to the point that he can't even move that rock some 30 years later. And what we concluded, me and Angry Man, is that he never had children. And on the face, for most men that haven't had children, now the men that have had children know what I'm talking about. But on the face of men that have never had children and don't understand why it is an important piece in your development, and why we're not judging men about whether you have children or not. The thing is, if you don't go through an experience, then you're going to be missing something in your psyche, in your development. You just are. You can't replace it. Having a child, being a father is something that you cannot replace. Going through a marriage is something that you cannot simulate. It's not a logical exercise. It's an experience. Like going through the phases of life is an experience. It's not a logical exercise. You can't be 20 and know what it's like when you're 60. No, it's not possible, because you have to experience it. That's where wisdom comes in. Being a father, you have to experience it. And being a father of your own biological child is something that you cannot replicate for a host of reasons. But the reason that Obsidian's angst doesn't make sense to men that have children is because we understand intrinsically and automatically what the women were trying to do and why they didn't respect his choice. Because in the raising of children, there's a balance between the child's choice and what's best for the child. And the reason it takes me back to that, respecting the child, which he was a child of his mother and his father. He's 17, 18 years old. Even though he was physically a grown man, he was still their child. And they acted as his parent, as they're supposed to, rightly or wrongly. And it takes me back to my grandson's graduation from kindergarten and the hours of work that it took to get him to learn how to write and to learn how to read and to learn how to spell and learn how to learn his numbers and learn how to add and all that kind of stuff. All the stuff that he didn't want to do. If it were up to him, he would have never have learned to write. And I'm sure it was traumatic for me and him to actually sit down and as he's writing or trying to write, or try to make one letter, a letter A, and me telling him, not hitting him, but telling him, erasing it, telling him to do it again. Do it again. Do it again. That's me not respecting his choice. Or sitting down and having to read when he would rather go outside and play or watch his iPad or play games or whatever he wants to do as a child, for him to sit down for 20, 30 minutes and read is me not respecting his choice or his wishes. Now, I know what some men are going to say, that there's a vast difference between a child that's 3, 4, 5 years old and a grown man, or supposedly a grown man at 17 or 18. And to men that don't have children, it looks like there's a vast difference. And for men with children knows that there isn't. There's a difference in degree about what choices are given to him. When you do, you override his wishes and his choice, versus him having his own mindset and making his own choice. There's always a degree. There's always that give and take. When do you do it? When do you not do it? When do you act in the best interest of your child versus what the child wants? There's always that dance. And you do not, as a human being, you do not do that perfectly. So whether you're a mother or your father, you do not do that perfectly. When you act, because you don't exactly know exactly how much to let go and how much to interject. And maybe his mother interjected way too much. I don't know. Maybe she overstepped those particular limits, which as a mother, there are very little limits that you can overstep, because that person, that child is yours. That's your contract. That's what you're supposed to do. Rightly or wrongly, you're supposed to do whatever you think that child needs, regardless of what that child says. And sometimes that's traumatic to the child. And sometimes that child will actually hold that against you. It is what it is. And sometimes you're flat-footed, dead wrong about how you handled that. Now, recently, my daughter said exactly the same thing about me. There's some things that she thought I was flat-footed, dead wrong. And maybe I was. And she resented some of my decisions as a father. What softened her view? What softened my son's view? Because I'm sure he felt the same way. Now they have to sit in my chair. They have to stand in my shoes, and they have to make the same decisions. And they have to live with the mistakes that they make with their relationships and the position that they put themselves in with their children. Because now you're on the clock and you're going to be judged. And given the same scenario as a parent, would you make that same decision that your parents made, or would you do something different? And given the same circumstances that your parents were in, and the same circumstances that they were looking at the time, would you have made a different decision, and why? And can you see the other side? So it's not about the decision. It's not about whether it was right or wrong. It's a matter of fact that they're human beings and they made it. And as a father, as a parent, you have to respect it. If the ultimate goal was to make a better person, was to help that child out. And that's the problem with Obsidian right now. He's never had a child. He's never stood in his father's shoes. He's never stood in his mother's shoes, because he's never had to make that decision. Now, theoretically, he would have never done it to his child. Theoretically. But that's theory. And as an old chemist, you know about theory. Theory lasts as long as it's on paper. But when you have to go to that beaker and those test tubes and the Bunsen burners and actually prove that theory in the physical world, it's a different dynamic. Ask any chemist, any scientist about their breakthrough. They'll tell you about 1,000 failures of their theory. The theory's on paper. The experiment is in real life. A lot of your breakthroughs are happy accidents because your theory was wrong, but it led to a truth. And on the way, as a parent, on your way to trying to prove your theory, you have a lot of happy accidents. You learn a lot of truths on the way, and sometimes they're painful. But as bad as you think your parents were, as bad as you think your childhood was, when you become a parent, you start reflecting and you see your parents not as the gods, not as perfected human beings, but as human beings that are flawed. And given their circumstances, you can't say that you would have been a better person or a better parent than they were. In my opinion, that's why Obsidian should let this particular thing go. Your mom was doing her job, whether you like it or not, whether she was wrong or not. She was doing her job. You don't have to like what she tried to do or even understand what she tried to do, but it is time to let it go, because at the end of the day, she was not trying to hurt you. At the end of the day, she was doing what she thought was best for you as her child, as I am still doing for my children, even though they're in their 30s. Sometimes they don't like it. My son was saying he doesn't want to hear what I have to say, because he knows what I'm going to tell him. And what I'm going to tell him he disagrees with. But the only reason he doesn't hold it against me is because he knows that what I'm trying to do, or what the advice I'm trying to give him, is to make his life better. As flawed an individual as I am, as old as I am, and as grown as he is, to me, he's still my little boy. To me, he's still my contract. To me, sometimes what I have to say, or the advice I have to give, overrides his wishes. And as I told him yesterday and a couple of days before, at the end of the day, you're a grown man. At the end of the day, you make your own decisions. At the end of the day, you will have to pay for the decisions that you make, as I have. But the thing is, at the end of the day, you have to get on the field of battle and do battle. You have to get on the field and actually play the game, win or lose. And you have to respect the other players that have come before you, that have been on that field and lost or won, because that's what it's all about. Because once you get on that field, once you do it, regardless of what decisions that your parents made, you understand them, because that is the game, that is the field, and you do the best with what you have. And hopefully at the end of the day, you come out with decent kids, because that's the goal. Son played basketball, which is what he wanted. My daughter graduated from college, which is what she wanted. Got another daughter that's working her way through college. For most people's metric, that is success, regardless of anything else. You have mannerable, level-headed children that are contributing members of society, and they have a shot at the good life. That's all you want. So, let me wrap this up. Obsidian, get over it. Your mom is not your enemy. Your mom didn't try to ruin your life. Your mom acted as a parent trying to help her child, rightly or wrongly. And instead of staying in a child's mindset, because that's what you're doing, you're staying in the child's mindset because you're talking about, what about my choice? What about if you're a parent, you know that the needs of the child will override what the child's wishes are. She saw her child injured. She saw her child possibly not happy, in her mind, not happy. And as a parent, it was her job, or she saw it as her job, to try to fix it. That's what parents do. That is their job. That is their reason for having you. That is their mission as a parent. Now, if she was wrong, she was wrong. If she did damage, she did damage. But at the end of the day, it wasn't done in malice. So if it wasn't done in malice, it's time to get over it and put that as in the past and go on. Because the next 30 years, those are all your decisions. Those are all your decisions. Where you are in life is your decision. Your relationship with women are your experiences, not your mother's. Women are who they are, just like America is who it is. Okay, I can't, a black man in America, I can't stop being black, and I can't stop white people from being racist. It is what it is. That's the environment that I'm stuck in. I have to manage it. Black women are who they are. I either deal with them or I don't. I either take them as they are because they're a unique creature, because they've been formed in America. Just like as a black man, I've been formed in America. I have to accept them as they are or not, because those are my decisions. From 0 to 18, those are your parents' decisions. Because I've said that to my children. 0 to 18, those are my decisions. What you want takes a back seat to what I think that you need. That's all that happened on your prom date. What you wanted took a back seat to what your mother thought that you needed. End of. When you crossed over, became a man, then your decisions have to be respected, because the contract is over. As I do with my son, from 0 to 18, those are my decisions. We became a man, those are his. Just like when he's interacting with his son. His son will whine and want something, but at the end of the day, that's up to his father. And when that will stop, it's up to him and his son. Just like for me and my son, when that contract ended, that was between me and him. The negotiation point that all children and parents go through. But anyway, I've rambled long enough. This is BGS out, and I'll see you guys on the next one.